Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Today is Thursday, January 16th. This is the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. It is 9:01 in the morning, and we are here this morning with Andy Julo. Talk to us about the Regional Development Corporation. Welcome so much, Andy. We're looking forward to hearing about how your work intersects with our work.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm gonna look at Jonathan. It's on the screen.
It's on the sheet.
All right, good. Yeah. So yes, I'm Andy Julo. I am the executive director for the Lake Champlain Islands Economic Development Corporation. That's my home RDC, but I am also the president of the Regional Development Corporations of Vermont. That's the role that I speak to you in today, and we'll get a little bit into the difference between all of those. I appreciate you making time for me today. I appreciate you making an hour. I will not talk at you for an hour. I'm sure you're getting plenty of long form briefings. I hope we can keep this conversational. There'll be lots of questions. I think the purpose today for me, top of the biennium, is to share a little bit about the RDCs, what we are, what we do. Thank you for being part of this committee. The economic development landscape is really big, as you probably are finding out. There's lots of players involved. There's so many different dimensions to it that no organization could do all of it. So there are a lot of organizations that work in the economic development field. Some overlap, do some of the same things, but target different audiences. And then others have areas where they hand off to another organization. And as you probably find, none of those handoffs are 100% black and white. There's always a fuzzy area as projects progress from one organization to another. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the RDCs and who we are and what we do and what that the Regional Development Corporations of Vermont is as an entity. And then dive a little bit into what we do for the state of Vermont, where you interact with the RDCs. And then talk a little bit about this legislative session, our goals that we hope to see come out of this building, and our own internal goals that may impact the decisions that you make here, the things that we are thinking of doing over the next 12 months that might have some bearing on your decision making. So with that, let me dive on in here. So, at a high level, what is a regional development corporation, or what is the legal definition? We are a nonprofit entity. We are not 501c3s, so we are not charitable. We have 12 RDCs, and all of them are either a 501c4 or a 501c6. So we are a public benefit entity, pay taxes. That's been a point of confusion in the past. Sometimes RDCs hold property temporarily to pre-develop it. We pay real estate taxes while that are taxes on the real estate while we hold that property. We pay sales tax, all of that. We are not a 501c3. We are all governed by boards of directors from people within our region. So I am hired by my board. We had a quarterly board meeting last night. I answer to them. They set the priorities of the RDCs. So those priorities may differ from RDC to RDC based on the board objectives. And there are 12 RDCs that cover the state of Vermont, the entire state of Vermont. There is no overlap. So you notice 12 is not 14. We have 14 counties in the state of Vermont. So RDCs, while sometimes coming close to being county organizations, are not quite. Mine is up there in the top left in blue. I do cover Grand Isle County, and everybody around me tends to fall to county lines. My colleague Tim Smith in Franklin has Franklin County lines. Greater Burlington Industrial Development Corporation covers all of Chittenden County. But then we've got NVDA with Dave Snedeker in the Northeast Kingdom. He has 3 counties, Essex, Caledonia, and Orleans are all part of his region. And then over in this part here, central part, east part, Washington, Orleans, and Windsor is split between 3 organizations: Central Vermont, Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, and Springfield Regional Development Corporation. So Not exactly along county lines. We do have a website, rdcsofvermont.org, and one of the tabs is Find Your RDC. So whatever town you're in, you can look that up as a business. You can find out which one of the RDCs applies to your particular region. If you need to know what we look like, there we are, 12 bubbles of the directors of the 12 regional development corporations. Really great group of people. It has been kind of steady for a while with these 12, at least since I came on. I think we just added Melissa a little bit after I came on. Some of you, if you've been on this committee a while, Fred Kenny is in the top left. He was my predecessor as the president of the RDCs of Vermont, so he used to do this shtick. He is retiring in July, so we will have somebody new in Addison. Just as important, I think, of understanding what a regional development corporation is, we need to kind of understand what they are not. And I get confused with RPCs or Chamber of Commerce all the time. We are, first of all, we're not a state agency. We are independent nonprofits who have contracts for certain services with you from time to time. We have an annual one, and then we have some one-off contracts that we do get from the state to perform state services. But we are independent nonprofits answerable to our boards. Our boards set our agenda. Each RDC has a little bit of a different flavor to it, depending on what the needs of the region are. That allows us to, being independent, to meet the needs of our region. We're not a Chamber of Commerce, but first of all, two of us are actually merged with our Chamber of Commerce. So Rutland is a joint RDC, Chamber of Commerce. Lamoille is a joint RDC, Chamber of Commerce, but those are separate functions within. That being said, we help businesses, and a lot of businesses are in the hospitality industry. So we do end up supporting businesses that are in the tourism industry. My region in particular, Grand Isle County, it's agriculture and tourism. Those are the top industries. And so we actually delve a lot into promoting hospitality and our tourism businesses. We do commercials on WCAX. We put out a resource guide that goes out to all the stores so people can find restaurants and hotels and things along that line. But we are distinctively different from a Chamber of Commerce. We're there to support business. Sometimes business is hospitality and tourism, and we support that. But that's not our focus. We focus on whatever the business needs to succeed. We also are not a regional planning commission. However, two of the RDCs are actually a joint RPC RDC. That's a format that they have seen fit that works best for their area. That is NVDA in the Northeast Kingdom. They are a joint planning commission and RDC. I think my colleague Dave Snedeker is going to be in at 10 o'clock testifying in his RPC role to that portion. Also, Bennington is a combined planning commission RDC down there. And there are some overlaps in what we do, and particularly in infrastructure. That's really where RPCs and RDCs meet. Water, wastewater tends to be a real fuzzy area where we tend to work together on those two things. And municipalities can start with either one, RPC, RDC, and they'll kind of end up in the same place. So on a really high level, what are RDC missions and what do they do? And as I said, 12 independent corporations with 12 boards. We all set our own agendas, but I think the thing we have in common, three things we have in common, is we offer technical assistance to develop and strengthen businesses. So we might help businesses through our project, through brownfields remediation, helping them with lending, credit analysis, debt service. We help them quite a bit with VEGI, the Vermont Employee Growth Incentive guidance. We will be their counsel through most of it, not their legal counsel, but with their business counsel through the VEGI process as they go through that application. We administer NBRC grants. We are there to offer technical assistance to businesses and municipalities to help them move the economy forward. We lead workforce development initiatives and support employment. So that means we host job fairs. We support, where appropriate, incubators and accelerators. We support CTE wherever we can and career centers to move the workforce forward. It's a big part of what we do is visiting businesses, finding out their workforce needs, and reaching out to who can best address those needs. We connect businesses and municipalities to services through our networks and partnerships with local, state, and federal programs. That could be the SBDC, Vermont Training Program, VEGI, which is the Vermont Employee Growth Incentive, BGAP, which was the temporary flood relief program, Efficiency Vermont, ACCD's programs, CDBG, NBRC, all of these different and entities.
You want to talk the acronyms?
Yeah. My first few meetings as an RDC, I had to Google up and I was just constantly, and then they don't always, different states have different acronyms that overlap with ours, so you can go in the total wrong direction. So Small Business Development Center is the SBDC. They are primarily technical support for small businesses. So that's where you start as an entrepreneur. If you need a business plan, if you don't know where to start with tax structure, all of those technical assistance needs, Small Business Development Center. VTP is a Vermont training program. That is a state program through ACCD. And what it does is allow businesses to train up their employees, and the state will contribute half of their salary while that training is going on. So workforce need changes, your line staff needs to learn a new skill. They can work for 4 or 5, 6 weeks learning that skill and be offset by funds from the state of Vermont. Good morning. Morning. VEGI is the Vermont Employee Growth Incentive. We talked a lot about that last year. You will probably be talking a lot about that next year. It will come back. It is Vermont's form of a business incentive to encourage growth or to bring in businesses that are considering to locate here. It offers tax incentives to them to grow or move to the state of Vermont and do business here. BGAP, I honestly don't remember what it was as an acronym, but that is a temporary program, and it was flood assistance for physical damage during the 2023 and 2024 flood event. Do you remember what it was? Come on.
The Business Emergency Gap Assistance.
Thank you.
Just state your name. So thank you.
I shouldn't be pointing.
That's okay.
Out of line. Agency of Commerce and Community Development, CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. That is a federal program through HUD that does a number of things. It does a lot of, probably your Regional Planning Commission has done a lot of planning grants in your communities. CDBG funds those for the most part. They also do a disaster relief funding, which I will mention later here because Senator Welch has just secured some of that for the state of Vermont for us to address flooding. And NBRC is Northern Borders Regional Commission. It is a federal commission to invest in rural infrastructure and business. I believe the Appalachian Gap is probably the most famous federal commission, and most people have heard of that. The investments in West Virginia, Kentucky, that area. Ours is the Northern Borders Regional Commission. Everybody with me? Well, there's no more acronyms, right? Yeah, right. So where RDCs fit in the economic development ecosystem. So there's lots of groups out there, but I think just a couple to call out. The regional planning commissions are a big part of our landscape, and I really think of them as laying the foundation for growth. They help the municipalities develop zoning, develop planning. Without that, and start to form infrastructure, grids, and maps. Without that, you really can't do much. So that's the Regional Planning Commission's primary work. I know they're in at 10, so they do a lot more than that. But as far as we're concerned, if municipalities are struggling with that, we send them to the RPCs to get their town plan in order before they can start to really plan for growth. The Small Business Development Center and Community Action Agencies, those are CDOEO is the Community Action Agency for Chittenden County. There's also Capstone. There's a few others that are regional. Those are there for people who are starting businesses and they just need that basic technical assistance level. They need some help writing a business plan. They need to know where they can get financing. They need to know what their legal options are for setting up a tax structure. That's the kind of technical support Small Business Development Center does, and also the community action agencies. The community action agencies are need-based, so there is an income requirement to those. SBDC, there's no need requirement to be met on those. And so those two together, the regional planning commissions creating zoning and creating infrastructure so there can be business, and the Small Business Development Center and community action agencies, helping people get off the ground, really bring businesses to where they need to be to interact with RDCs. We pick it up from there when they're a small business, and we try to help them grow from small, medium, medium to large, large to not leaving the state, staying right here. Makes sense. And I mentioned the Regional Development Corporations of Vermont. I'm the president of the Regional Development Corporations of Vermont. That's the association of the 12. It's a loose association. There's no formal entity of the Regional Development Corporations of Vermont. But we do have a board. We have a president, a vice president, secretary, treasurer, member at large. That's our executive team. I am the president. Bill Colvin from Bennington is the vice president, your boss. Secretary is Erica Hoffman-Keese of Green Mountain. Treasurer is Bob Flint from Springfield, and our member at large is Fred Kenny from Addison. We meet monthly with ACCD, Department of Labor. We have 2 guest speakers that are relative to economic development at those monthly meetings. The first Friday of every month at 9:30. You are welcome to join those. I know they probably won't work during the session, but during the off session, if you want to join those, they're pretty good overview of everything that's going on in the economic development landscape during that month. ACCD and DOL do good presentations about what they're up to at that time. So you can join us. Our website is rdcsofvermont.org. That's got all our collective information, some of the grant opportunities that we have going on as a group at that time. We all have our own 12 websites, but we do have that one that we try to put everything that's central to everybody on, so it's easy to find. And you can also find your RDC director. So as far as us interacting with the state of Vermont, that is done by contract. And the majority of RDC budgets has nothing to do with the state of Vermont. So you contract with us. It depends wildly on the organization, how large they are. But the state portion of a budget for an RDC can run between 5% and 40%. Generally, the larger ones have their own sources of revenue. They have memberships. We have loan funds. We have commercial property that we develop and profit from. And we have grants from federal sources as well. So the state portion of an RDC budget is pretty small. By and large, we are pulling in our own revenue, and our board of directors is making decisions about how we use that and develop the economy from there. We do have a state grant that is $122,000 a year per RDC, and that is an annual thing. And what you get from us, we'll talk a little bit about that in a further slide. We have another grant that we receive from you, which is $10,000 per year, and that is specifically to compile the state priority project list. So we keep tabs on the projects that are going on throughout the state, particularly those that might require public investment, wastewater, community projects, any kind of infrastructure, businesses that are nonprofit that might qualify for public funding. We compile all of those projects locally. We put together a committee. We work with our regional planning commission. We score and rank all the projects in our region. We take the top 10, we drop everybody after, and we send the top 10 to the state of Vermont. And so the state of Vermont has 120 projects on a website right now that will flip to 2025 shortly. That is considered to be the 120 most important projects out there in the state. That's used for grant funding. That's used by you when you think about if you have funds and you need to allocate them and design grants or assistance programs, what's out there to be done in the landscape as you design those projects. RDCs have been used for technical assistance and other programs by the state recently, so we'll go through some of the more recent ways that you have employed us to fulfill need in the state. Any questions at this point? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Who receives that priority? Someone at the state level receives that? Who's that?
That is the Agency of Commerce and Community Development that gets that.
Thank you.
That.
Other questions? Go ahead, Alan.
What kind of interaction do y'all have with VEDA?
Vita, we have a lot of interactions with Vita. They join our monthly RDC meetings. We actually do joint legislative briefings with them, so we are very close with Vita. Yeah. Generally, businesses will come to us for a project, and it's a amalgamation of Vita commercial financing, and then we have revolving loan funds to often cover the gap to make a project work.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
And one more part.
Because you have this contract with the state with these various funds, what is the reporting that goes back to the state on this?
Yeah, so we do a quarterly report back to the state, and then we do our annual report is our fourth quarter report that is a little bit more extensive.
And that breaks down, the different, which communities were, businesses in those communities were worked with and
Yeah.
what that was all done.
Yeah, and I actually have some slides here on the metrics that you get from us. Yeah. That's the next one. Here we go. So the requirements. So we have a contract and it specifically lists, these are the things that we want you to do on behalf of the state of Vermont. And then we want you to report back to us on the different metrics that you've done throughout here. So one of the things that we do, and I really consider this kind of the core and the best part of what we do, is we get out of our chair and we go out and we visit with businesses and we talk to the owners and we find out what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what are their areas of need. A lot of times the businesses that what they need the most is something that some other business can offer them. So it's as simple as saying, you need this service over here has it, and you make that connection and the problem kind of solves itself. So that's a really valuable part of what we do. Get out there. You'd like us at a minimum to go to 25 businesses, and 50 is kind of the high mark for the number of businesses we visit. A lot of us get a lot more than that, but it's 25 to 50 is the scored range. You asked that we keep a database or enter into a database of state sites that are available. So if a commercial property is available or something is available for lease, you ask that the RDCs enter that into a statewide database so that a business looking for a home or a piece of property to develop only has to go to one spot and they can scope out throughout the state. If somebody wants to see that tour, that's our job is to arrange that for the business owner. That's usually when we will pick up the phone, call somebody at ACCD, get them out there. If it's a promising prospect, we'll get everybody out there we need to get. So if they have questions, we'll turn it to people who are in that group as they tour the property. We hold events for you. We do one finance and capital education workshop, one job fair or workforce event, and then you give us two events to structure as we see fit. We need to demonstrate to you every quarter that we are working closely with the regional planning commissions, with Apex, which is the state organization that helps connect businesses to state and federal contracts, and to the Small Business Development Center and to municipal offices. Oftentimes that looks like how many times, we went to this meeting on this day, this select board, this planning commission, this date. Demonstrate that we are making efforts to develop the workforce in our region. That's something you ask us to track for you. Demonstrate that we work with the Regional Planning Commission to advance infrastructure for business growth. So lately that's been a lot of water and wastewater projects with RPCs and RDCs. That we participate in the creative economy or, when appropriate, incubators and accelerator efforts in our region. When we go out and make those business visits, you ask that we enter into a CRM. Currently, that's just a series of spreadsheets, but the state is working on one that will be a centralized Salesforce CRM. Talk about the number of employees they have, any challenges that they have. Ideally, that would go into a CRM so that everybody is kind of aware at ACCD what's going on with certain businesses. You asked that we maintain a newsletter and a social media presence and an up-to-date website. Just get our mission out there and connect with as many people as possible and pull them into their RDC. You asked that we have one meeting with legislatures per year. So I get a check mark right here today for that one. Yes, we meet with municipalities, at least, or its planning commissions, but you asked for two. That we refer to partners in state programs such as VEGgie, Vermont Employee Growth Incentive, the VTP, Vermont Training Program, and STEP, which I forget what that one is. Too. I won't put you on the spot. But that's part of the process. When we go out and we visit with a business, a lot of times it will end in a referral. We don't do that, but we will, refer you to somebody who does help with that.
To back up,
Yeah.
meet with municipalities, two. That's two within your entire district.
Yep.
Okay, because like my district, Green Mountain Economic Development, they have like 37 towns or something. And so take a long time for some of those towns to see it.
Yep. Yeah, I think most of us blow through that too pretty easily. Yeah. That when we go out and do those business visits, that we grab somebody from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development to come along with us 3 to 9 times a year with those visits. We do report quarterly, so that's a requirement. The reporting is a little heavier halfway through the year, and then at the end of the year, there's some additional reports as well. But quarterly is when you get a report from us. That we show up to the monthly ACCD RDC meetings, which happen the first Friday of every month. That we demonstrate that we're working with local partners. That's kind of flexible. The local partners may be different in every region. So whatever partners are important in our region, for me, there's an organization called CIDR that does an awful lot with seniors and senior housing. So that's a very important one to demonstrate for me. That you demonstrate we work with the Small Business Development Center and other technical assistance providers. That could be Capstone, that could be Vermont Professionals of Color Network, all of these other organizations that provide technical assistance, that we're having some interaction with those groups when appropriate. That we annually report how the state and federal dollars have been leveraged. So any grant dollars that have been used in our region, that we write up how that made that difference in that project. That we do peer-to-peer reviews every other year. So we go around and we visit other RDCs. We see how they function. We have questions for our colleagues, gather up a report on that and submit it to ACCD. And that we're doing at least one professional development course per year. So those are all the metrics that you were asking for in exchange for that $122,000 a year RDC grant that you give us. Questions on those?
So just the question on when you provide technical assistance to businesses, do you report on what kind of technical assistance you provide back to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development?
Yeah, usually we list the date, the agency, and then the outcome of the technical assistance, which usually is.
But it's not required as part of the grant report.
No.
Do you have other funding sources and funding streams? Is that really dependent on each one?
Yeah, it depends on each one. And primarily that's membership dues. A lot of businesses are memberships of RDCs, so that's part of it. A lot of RDCs are very heavy into industrial parks. They manage those. They manage commercial properties that they lease. So that's a source of revenue. We do get grants from federal sources as well. What am I missing, Jonathan?
Does anyone receive any public funding from municipalities?
Municipalities, yes, very good. Yes, a lot of municipalities contribute to RDCs.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, so Berry City has Berry and Berrytown has Berry area development.
Yeah.
So are you guys similar to them?
So they are not regional development corporations. They're local, and they would be a partner in this. Yeah, they're not part of the RDC network, but generally we work with those corporations.
Because I think they were a 501c4.
Mhm.
They recently changed to a 501c3.
They did. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And most of the local development corporations attend our meetings. So we're all kind of monthly meetings. So we're all kind of on the same page and hearing the same information.
There aren't too many of those around the state.
There really aren't. Yeah.
Andy, you also work with the outdoor recreation
groups have you or?
Yeah, so I actually just closed out a VORAC grant, and it's been a focus in my region just because recreation is so important to the islands that we focused a lot on cycling and paddling. Yeah,
I think Dave has two up in Kingdom, with Kingdom Trails.
right. Yeah, and the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail has been something that all of them have been focused on. Yeah.
All right, outdoor recreation.
Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, I believe.
We'll hear more about that from Commissioner Fitzko from Forest Parks and Recreation when she comes in. I think she's here at Park Day.
So that's what we do for the 122. And as I mentioned, there's also the $10,000 grant that you give us to twice a year to compile and rank that list of priority projects and submit those to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then, need arises and we might do one-off programs and you will contract with us to do a program for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever is appropriate. One that we recently did was the SBTAE program, which we did, you funded 2 years ago, and we came back last year, we asked for funding from you and you passed it along, but it didn't make it through the Senate. So we did not do it this year. But this is a program and it's very small awards. The average award was $3,400, 3,463. We take applications from businesses and we got a lot. We funded 209 projects. There were 300 that were waitlisted that we never got to. It's a very popular program. But if a business has a technical need beyond business plan, so they're up, they're established, but they don't have a website, they have no marketing plan, they don't understand how to use their social media, they've got inventory that's out of control, they can apply to the program. We maintain a list of Vermont vendors that do all of those things. And we make that connection and the grant pays for that connection and that service to happen. So if a business needs a website, we connect them with a web developer. We pay the web developer to do the work and we make sure that that work happens. That was a program we ran 2 years ago. We ran two other programs before that. We didn't run them. We were a part of them. They were federally funded, did similar work, particularly after COVID, to try to get businesses back on their feet. We ran this one with state funding a couple of years ago. We thought it was very successful. So we're going to make a little ask this year that you fund it again when we get to that part. But any questions on that SBTA?
Before you go on, so you make the connections regularly, but what the grant did was allowed you to pay for the service that the small business needed.
Yeah. Yep, it was 100% funded.
And that's the 209 projects funded was that statewide.
Yes.
John?
So there's the recipients, the beneficiary is the business that received the service and to another extent, the business that provided the service.
Yeah. Yeah. Two Vermont companies benefit with every connection that we make. Yeah. And I think we feel, I mean, the grant is nice. The navigator services and just making those connections was extremely valuable in and of itself.
Is there any way of quantifying what those connections have done for business? So, I mean,
Yeah.
and it may not be monetary, but it may be kept them in business or allowed them to grow. Maybe they're close to closure and it's got them going again. I don't know.
We have a success story booklet that I could give to you. Actually, I think I have it in my backpack. So maybe when I'm done, it's an extra copy. I can leave it here with you and you can all look at
Yeah,
it.
or if you can send it to us electronically, if you can send it to Anna Grace and
Yeah.
I'll get it.
Yeah.
That's those are the kind of things that we need to see
Sure.
when, I'm sure there's something in the budget or there's going to be an ask to continue funding the navigator service.
Yep.
And those are the kinds of things that we need to understand and to see before we say, yes, continue it on.
Yeah.
It's been, it's a huge success. It's a small amount of money for what we're getting out of it.
Sure. Yeah, we can get you an electronic copy of that. And I, in the past, I know there's been talk in the room about us doing more with small businesses, and we really do love this program. We love working with small businesses. The two programs that we have in our tool belt are Vermont Training Program and Veggie. And they both have pretty heavy requirements on benefits that a lot of small businesses really struggle to meet. So when we walk through the door of a small business, we don't often have programs to offer them. And so when you run a lot of you probably run small businesses, your time is very valuable. If somebody doesn't have anything to offer you, you're not going to make time for them. So this gave us a foot in the door with small businesses and allowed us to engage with them, which is really great. So I had it here in the slideshow, BGAP, Business Emergency Gap Assistance Program. So this was one that we were a part of. You did not specifically contract with us on this one. We just did this one kind of pro bono because it was a need. But we became technical assistance providers in this program when the floods in 2023 and 2024 happened. There were 2 rounds of this assistance. And this is for physical damage. So if the floodwaters came through and took out, your inventory, this program compensated in part for the damages that you experienced during the flooding. It was $18.5 million awarded in 2023, and I believe 2.7 so far in 2024 that are still going out. And the last, more recent one, this is actually, we were on the receiving end of this as grantees, but this is the Rural Industrial Development Program grants. And the problem that we're trying to solve here is that the space that is suitable for commercial and industrial development in Vermont, you need a lot of things to intersect, and there aren't that many properties that actually meet that need. You need a relatively flat piece of land. It needs to be connected to water, wastewater, transportation routes, the electrical grid. That, when you start to cross off all these filters, is a pretty small amount of space. And housing is important. Housing is taking up as much as it can to build. But this program wanted to make sure that if there were pieces of property that were suitable for industrial and commercial use down the road, that we reserve them and make them available so that businesses can grow there. So it gave grants to some of the RDCs to either purchase land or take land that they had and pre-develop it and make it available for businesses to come along and open up shop there. So that's who we are and how we interact with the state. Any questions so far before we dive into priorities for the session? Goodness. Yeah, doing a good job, Bill Meader. So priorities, obviously, housing is a priority for everybody, and there are lots of smart people working on this problem. And the problem is really well covered. Our unique concern is that housing that we develop meets the gaps that we have in our workforce. So, I mean, we see businesses all the time that need specific professions, and we want to make sure that housing exists for those professions. If a business needs 4 forklift drivers and 3 engineers to grow, but there are houses in their region that are suitable for those particular workers. We feel water and wastewater investment is really the way, particularly in the rural areas, to continue to achieve housing. We work with a lot of municipalities on their water and wastewater projects. And it's a really slow process. I mean, it's naturally slow, but in these rural areas, you're dealing with towns that have no capacity for it. There's volunteers. Everybody's learning as they go. And there was a great window with ARPA where there was all this public funding, and it's disappeared. And a lot of these projects just didn't get to the table fast enough to take advantage of it, but they are making good faith efforts to build water and wastewater in their systems. And we hope that there'll be some funding sources for those as they go forward. We've been talking to the town of Essex about a housing opportunity that I think is probably going to come into the legislature at some point to develop specific workforce housing, allow businesses to open up a master lease, have a building built, and then rent those units to their employees at a slightly below market value. Really support that kind of creative thinking to specifically address the needs of business housing, and are happy to be part of that discussion going forward. And of course, further modifications to Act 181 to just continue to remove any barriers to housing is going to be helpful to relieve some of that pressure.
Can you give us some examples of barriers to housing that you would think are productive ways to go?
Sure. So I think we have the exemptions, and I think that those exemptions, outside of those exemptions, you still have restrictions to building housing.
Tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah. Yep. I think the way you structure the tiers is going to be very critical in the long run.
From a rural area.
Yeah.
So the tier 2 in the grand scheme of things wasn't really impacted all that much in promoting housing, I think, really. It's sort of the same regulatory regime kind of stayed the same.
Yeah.
So I hear you. Be nice to know, what specific areas, what specific barriers you folks are thinking of. So we, just keep that in our mind.
Yeah, I think the road rule, just understanding how specifically, I mean, there's 850 feet. What does that mean? What does that impact? How many housing projects does that positively, negatively impact? What's the right amount for that? Yeah.
I was just gonna have you back up for a minute.
Yeah.
Act 181 is a law that was passed last year.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Talk about it for a minute.
Sure. So that created exemptions in villages and downtown districts from Act 250 for a period of years. And then there's a long-term solution with tiers that would be open to more development or restricted based on proximity to mountains and river corridors. Yeah.
We can talk about that. Folks, it's an act that was passed last year. It's going to take a little bit of time to kind of build it out, and then to allow some more exemptions from Act 250 for housing and other development, mostly housing. And it's going to take a couple of years to really build the system that it designed, right? So 2027-ish, we should have it fully built out. A lot of those exemptions are going to wane, and then we have to really figure out what the long-term plan is. And that's not our committee, but it's really important for our committee to understand that, because workforce housing is a priority. So,
The priority for workforce development.
yep.
I think you all understand when we go around and visit businesses and we talk about growth, that's the number one barrier right now, is that they can't find employees to go to that next step. Yep. There's a lot of business owners washing dishes right now when we go around the businesses.
Any been any discussions looking at current use and lands that are bordered on roads to utilize some of those lands that are right on the road to use as building homes?
Yeah.
Because and relaxing some of the regulations around current use to allow that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded issue, but if you look at the overlay of a lot of these villages, you have two things going on. You've got a town that has come in and said, this is where we want density. And then you've got agricultural land where we are actually incentivizing non-density over the same space.
One of my towns is, they're landlocked. They can't grow
Yeah.
because there's so many farms in that town. And they're all, generally, most of them are in current use. So how do we allow for some of that to happen without, taking over the whole land and for development? Just looking at small tracts, it could really help in that whole process.
Yeah, and there's significant penalties for taking it out. We just had a childcare facility that got built, but they had to pay a significant penalty to take it out of current use when it was donated by a farmer. Yeah.
See, those are the things that we should be looking at, because they do provide a huge benefit to the workforce. and not our purview, but it is something that is in the equation of workforce development.
I was wondering on that if there was a way to link up agriculture, workforce housing, and I guess general public workforce housing. If there's a way to kind of like make those sites purpose built in that way. Anyway, something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple of grant rounds that address workforce housing, and I know from experience with a couple of agricultural operations, their house was actually the worst part of the property, like their house was
Yes.
falling apart.
Yeah.
And the option was they could spend some money and build a nice house for their workers, but their house was completely.
No, that is a
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah. So brownfields are any area that's contaminated, and it's a shocking amount of properties that meet this. Really, any village that's had any kind of commercial operation for years, if the business changed their own oil for years, they're probably going to find something. And what we found is a lot of publicly funded projects. They start out, they've got a budget, you get grants, it's a wonderful thing, and then you realize the soil is contaminated, and unless there's brownfield funds to come in here and clean that up, that project just doesn't happen. And one example of that is the Yellow Barn project out in Greensboro Bend. That was fully funded, was ready to go, and they hit a situation where they needed remediation. There hadn't been brownfield funds available. That project sort of stopped in its tracks, and it's a really great place. South Hero Meeting House is another one that's publicly funded in my region. It's a brownfield site, so without brownfield money to clean it up, that is just going to be a dead spot in the village. So we would love to see more money invested in brownfields, another $5 million running. The EDA has had a lot of brownfield money, Economic Development Authority, it's federal. That is drying up. So if we're going to keep that going, it is going to have to come from the state level.
So brownfield money, usually that's from municipalities, not businesses, correct?
Usually those are publicly funded projects or municipalities, so nonprofits or municipalities. Yeah.
Which gets a little tricky, because I know we had a project in Barry that we had to take ownership of the building.
Yep.
Got the funds, did the brownfield work, and then gave it back to the developer. And, it certainly would be a little bit helpful to make it so that those funds go to the developer and the municipality doesn't have to deal with.
That's something we do too. RDCs will take possession of it,
Yes.
clean it up, yeah, and then they could turn it over to developer. Yeah, it would be nice to not have that middle step, right?
Yeah.
Exemption from the property transfer tax for that.
I don't know what that is.
We'll get to it.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, we would love to bring back the Small Business Technical Assistance Exchange. It gives us something in our tool bag to pull out when we go to a small business. Like I said, we had 300 applications that we never got to serve in the program. We did 209, but there were 300, and that was beyond the funding. It was $1.25 million last time. And like I said, we served 209. We had need for 300 more that could have done. Now the infrastructure already exists. So we have the administration, we have the database. We could just open that back up.
On this, I mean, I do work with a lot of small businesses, and one of the biggest problems I have is finding web developers. But one question I have is, what is the vetting process for this? Because I can't tell you how many of these clients, they find a web developer, promise them the world, and nothing ever gets delivered.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we can do is we can intake somebody and do the best we can to assess their credentials. And if they don't perform, we do evaluations at the end. We will take them out of the database. That's probably the best we can do. Is somebody has a bad experience, we make sure that a second bad experience doesn't happen with that vendor.
And how does a vendor, like if someone wants to provide a service to
Yep.
these businesses, how would they go about getting on your list?
So we put out a registration process before we do any grant round and solicit vendors to come into the program. Yeah, I was a web software developer for a while in the islands, and there are tons of people out there looking for my services, but connecting with them, I mean, there's somebody on Standard that needs a website. I'm on the islands. We never interact. So this kind of plugs that connection.
Like the scope of work that was, that to work up was kind of a good way to vet.
Yeah,
Whether,
that's true. Yeah, there's a good scope of work process that you had to really say, here is what I'm going to do, here's my pricing, and submit that to us before we would allow the project to go forward. So we did have some vendors that just could not do that, and that was a sign they were probably not going to be able to complete the project and do the work well.
Just a question about the numbers on this project. So you said that there is a wait list of 300 applicants. Are you assuming or just imagining that funding came through? Are you imagining also that there would be additional applicants on top of that? And would it make sense to actually add maybe double to serve those and then also oncoming?
Yeah, I would think the need is going to completely refresh itself constantly. I don't think there's a pool of 400 people that need it and we'll whittle it down. I think it will always be a sizable number of people. And last time we did this round, you gave us specific groups that you wanted us to address. It was BIPOC, it was justice served individuals, it was rural, it was women. I believe it was mature Vermonters as well. So we prioritize those groups for you. And that's instruction that you provided us.
Just for our benefit, if you're looking for this money, to, if you could, track the folks who didn't get the money and how their business did or didn't get impacted by that, that could be something that would be helpful for us.
Sure. You're right, that down.
And actually, I also would love to know just like the rate of actual deliverables, like to Tony's point. Like the projects completed.
How many of them completed or what they?
Yeah, like how much they complete, like what they completed, and how what
sure.
the rate of completion was.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, for all of them or just like a sampling of?
I mean, if you have the data for all 209.
I'm sure we do, yes. Gnarly looking spreadsheet that shows all of that stuff. My colleague Melissa Bounty ran that and she's a data nerd. We good on the SBTA? All right. We'll write up something a little bit more formal for you to get going here. So supporting disaster recovery. So I mean, I know you're getting requests for lots of money and you have to watch the bottom line. So this is an area that we feel that there is still a lot of need out there from the floods, particularly for what we call economic injury. So physical damage was covered if you lost inventory, if your equipment was destroyed in the flood, that was partially covered by BGAP. If you were non-operational for 2 weeks because of that, or because of the municipal water system or the power grid being knocked out, and you were a hotel and you couldn't book for 2 or 3 weeks, none of that was covered. That's what we call economic harm, lost revenue that you could have had that not occurred. So we unfortunately got calls from Senator Welch around Christmas that he had secured a disaster supplemental of around $66 million at the federal level that can be administered through the Community Development Block Grant Program Disaster Relief Fund. So it's a supplemental to the HUD program, CDBG, that is specific to disaster relief. We have done this in 2016 after Irene. What we did, and we'd like to do a similar program that we model it after that 2016 program where we set up a fund and we fund sub-grants to businesses to help make them whole for the economic injury, help them get technical assistance to continue to pull their business out of the situation that it might be set back from by that process. So we would do that with federal funds. We would do all the administration. We wouldn't need any state funds. So we're not asking for any funds, but we want you to be aware this is something that we're going to set up that might fit a need that's here in the state that maybe we could stay in touch on that you don't have to provision for. It's something that the RDCs would manage and do.
So for the disasters that have already happened, or for those specific to flooding events?
Yes, this would be for the 23 and 24 events.
Great. And then agricultural businesses included?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
We would love to see that commercial, the Rural Industrial Development Program. We call it RIDIP. I don't know if anybody else does, but this program continue to receive some money in the program. And this is the one that sets aside land that is suitable for industrial and commercial development. It allows RDCs to take possession of that land with the funds to pre-develop it and then to sell it. And if we sell it, we put the funds back in the revolving fund.
So is this an existing program that you're seeking additional funding for, not a new program, you're just looking for additional funding?
It was a one-off program that was funded one time last year. So we would love to see it stay and have a few more dollars added to it.
And is that, so it's funded in the appropriations bill line item or in the mix of other line?
Item, one time,
Okay,
$1 dollars.
so there's no formal program.
There's no base to it yet.
Emily, you had a question?
Oh, I was just curious if you had data about like how many properties were fixed and sold and how, how the program,
Yeah, how it's going.
yeah.
So we just had 4 awards done this month. That's as far as we've gotten. So that, yeah. It's just been awarded. Nothing's been done with those properties yet. They're in progress.
Yeah. This, does this help with land acquisition and developing the land or one or the other, both?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be development, it could be land acquisition, acquisition. Yeah, I think we feel that one of the major barriers is just pre-development of that. And if it's pre-developed and it's ready to go, we'll get that business to come in, purchase it, and then put the money back in when they do. Project-based TIF, which I believe has been rebranded, not known as project-based TIF, but this is something that we would love to see. All these rural towns, they don't have the capacity for the full TIF district. I mean, I think it's kind of amazing to walk around some of these TIF districts that we see in White River Junction, on Market Street in South Burlington. It's amazing what's been accomplished through the tax increment financing. And we would love to see it done on a small scale in rural communities, particularly around housing. So we support that.
Michael?
Do you have a bill prepared for this?
I believe the administration will be bringing. Okay.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Same
question.
Thank you.
So we have one that we already submitted to legislative council.
Oh, that's it.
CTE, Career Technical Education. There's been a little hink in the formula where schools are somewhat disincentivized with the per pupil formula from sending students to CTE. We really feel that now this technical education is more important than it's ever been. As we see a very large generation begin to leave the workforce, a lot of these folks are in services that need to be replaced, that are not being replaced by our younger generation. And obviously, education is not your purview, but it's going to be a huge topic of conversation this legislative session. So as the way you fund education is reconsidered, we hope that CTE is also reconfigured in a way that brings more kids into technical education.
It actually is, we share jurisdiction with
Oh, okay.
education because CTE is a strong workforce builder.
Sure.
We will be, there will, I understand there'll be a hearing from the Agency of Education on Monday, Tuesday after. What time and where we'll be attending that hearing. As they continue to develop, that's one part of the whole discussion on education, financing and governance. It's a major part of it too. So
It's good to hear. Thank you.
I know the secretary is very interested in CTE.
We out of time?
We are not out of time. Go ahead.
Could you explain a little more what you meant by barriers to utilizing technical education?
Yeah, it's the per pupil formula and the way that it works out that when high schools transfer somebody to CTE, they lose that student count, and that can negatively impact the amount of funding that they receive for the high school.
At the high school, it should,
That's not,
because it's transferred.
Not exactly true. All right, that's my understanding, and I'm
yeah, no,
maybe out over my skis on that one.
yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay.
That's, yeah, that's not exactly accurate.
But we don't feel enough kids are going into CTE, yeah, and whatever those barriers are, hope we can overcome those when we construct the formula. Lightning round here, veggie. We won't be talking about it this session, but we intend to work with VEPSI to try to, this is the incentive for business growth in the state. We've had numerous conversations over the last couple of years about this. Other states are doing programs that are similar that probably are better utilized and more successful. We feel the utilization of veggie has been pretty low last few years. So we will have conversations with VEPSI, which is the Vermont Economic Progress Council that administers veggie, about ways that we might improve veggie going forward, starting next year.
Glad to hear that. That's one area I think that utilizing the people that sit on the VEPSI board. A lot of businesses, you know, RDCs sit on the board. I think it would be really helpful for the board to have some of those discussions and bring some ideas back to us, because, you know, veggie is really meant to assist businesses or assist employment growth during times of recession, when businesses have laid off people and we have high unemployment. We want to get people back into work, into jobs. And that's what that's designed to incent. And right now we've been in an extended period of low unemployment. And so it's tough to really apply veggie to that. What other things can we do to incent those companies to stay here and maybe make capital expenditures instead of, you know, increasing their workforce? So.
We want to continue to work towards workforce recruitment and development. The programs that we have are important. We feel the Vermont Training Program is very important as well, and that continues to receive funding and maybe additional funding. The job market moves so quickly. The vacancy, there's only so many people out there to fill vacancies. It is essential that when needs change in the business, that the employees can adapt and grow and be trained in the new positions. And that we provide some funding so that businesses can do that without penalty. And then lastly, you know, I think public safety, I think this is being addressed at a level here, but public safety is something that a lot of regions are concerned about going forward. It's something that is impacting businesses every day. That's good. Not for it. Thank you. Listen to me for an hour and 4 minutes.
All right, it was a really well done overview. Really appreciate that. Are there more questions for Andy? Well, I'm sure be back when we start talking about budget or work. So.
Yeah.
We're all anxious to see what's in the governor's budget.
Sure.
We'll move on from there when we start taking testimony. Andy, thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Yes.
Mitty, why don't we take about 10 minutes and be back here and get